Story part. Raxel Torm didn't wake up that morning expecting to be assaulted by a Roman centurion, but life on Helios' edge had a way of throwing curveballs. Of course, curveballs were practically tradition on this rust bucket of a station. It was stuffed into orbit around a star that had clearly given up on shining and was content to sulk in its dying embers. Raxel liked to think they had a lot in common. \n\n\u201c Torm, you useless sack of synthesized proteins, \u201d barked Grender, the shift foreman. He was the kind of guy who could make a motivational poster out of a hangover. \u201c those readings are spiking again. Go see what's pissed off this time. \u201d \n\n Raxel sighed. \u201c yes, boss. Wouldn't want the star to think we're slacking off. \u201d he grabbed his toolkit, which was half spatula, half hopes and dreams, and headed toward the observation deck. \n Helios' edge wasn't much to look at unless you were fond of the color gray and the comforting hum of near-catastrophic failure. Built during a time when fiscal responsibility meant cutting corners with safety scissors, the station was a patchwork of mismatched panels and duct tape. \n as Raxel made his way through the narrow corridors, the lights flickered like they were trying to signal an SOS. \u201c cheer up, guys. \u201d he muttered to the flickering bulbs. \u201c at least were not the ones imploding. \u201d \n he arrived at the observation deck, where a panoramic window presented a view of the asteroid they were supposed to be mining. Supposed to be, because lately something weird was going on. Not just regular weird, but the kind of weird that made you wonder if someone had been drinking too much dark matter. \n the anomaly appeared as a shimmering ripple in space, like reality had a few too many drinks and was doing a shimmy. \u201c well, don't you look like trouble, \u201d Raxel muttered, adjusting the sensors. \n the readings were all over the place. Electromagnetic spikes, temporal distortions, and something that might \u2019v been a distant cousin to deja vu. The kind of readings that made you want to pop a few extra antacids and consider a career change. \n u201c hey Torm, you seeing this? \u201d came the voice of Lyra, second in command and first in sarcasm. She appeared on the comm screen with a smirk that could outsnark a black hole. \n u201c if by this you mean the space-time salsa outside, then yeah. \u201d Raxel replied. \n Lyra rolled her eyes. \u201c think it \u2019's dangerous. \u201d \n u201c define dangerous. \u201d \n u201c blowing us all to hell in a fiery ball of death. \u201d \n Raxel scratched his chin. \u201c could be, or it could just be a celestial light show. Hard to tell without touching it, which I \u2019m not volunteering for. \u201d \n u201c good plan. \u201d Lyra said dryly. \u201c let \u2019's not make this week any more exciting than it needs to be. \u201d and just then, the deck shook. Not the gentle sway of a slightly off-kilter station, but a jolt that sent Raxel stumbling into a control panel. \n u201c sounds like someone \u2019's upset. Backslash U201D, he grumbled, pushing himself upright. The alarms wailed like banshees with a grudge. Backslash U201C, what now? Backslash U201D \N. He looked out the window, expecting to see the usual asteroid debris. Instead, he saw something altogether different. A figure. No, multiple figures. They were appearing out of thin air, shimmering into existence as if the universe had decided to play a game of \U2018, who invited the anachronisms. \U2019, \N U201C Lyra. You seeing this? U201D Raxel said, not bothering to keep the disbelief out of his voice. N U201C if by U2 a Roman centurion, a samurai, a Viking, among others. They stood blinking at the harsh lights of the observation deck, clearly as confused by their sudden displacement as Raxel was. N U201C, well, that U2019's not something you see every day. U201D Lyra said with a chuckle that was half nerves, half amusement. N the Roman centurion spotted Raxel, and deciding he was the local authority, brandished his sword. It looked both intimidating and depressingly out of place against the backdrop of flickering control panels. N U201 see you there. U201D, the centurion barked in a language that somehow made it through the translation algorithms. U201C, identify yourself. U201D N Raxel raised his hands, wondering if the man could see the irony of demanding an ID while wearing a skirt. U201C Raxel Torm, engineer. U201D, he said. U201C, welcome to Helios Edge, the galaxy's most disappointing vacation spot. Can I help you? U201D N the centurion frowned, as if realizing this was not the Mediterranean and his all-expenses-paid trip was a lie. U201C, what is this place? U201D N U201, see a mining station. U201D Raxel replied. U201C, and before you ask, no, we don U2019T validate parking. U201D N Lyra, U2019's voice crackled over the comms. U201C, think we should call security. U201D N U201C, what are they gonna do? Arrest history. U201D N U201C, good point. Better let Grender know. He U2019 LL, love this. U201D N Raxel nodded, already imagining the foreman's reaction to their new guests. If the man couldn't U2019T handle a missing supply crate without a vein popping, this was going to be a fireworks show. N the Viking had decided to inspect the nearby control panel, prodding it with an axe that looked like it U2019D seen better eons. U201C, not sure poking buttons is the best idea. U201D Raxel called out. U201C, this place is temperamental enough without Norse intervention. U201D N U201C, what magic is this? U201D, the Viking growled, eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. N U201C, the kind that U2019 LL fry your beard if you U2019 renot. U201C, trust me, I backslash U 2019 V been trying to figure it out myself. Backslash U 201D backslash N the samurai, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Backslash U 201 See, this is not our world. Who commands here? Backslash U 201D backslash N U 201 C Technically, that would be the foreman or possibly the coffee machine. Backslash U 201D Raxel said. Backslash U 201 C though neither's particularly forgiving. Backslash U 201D backslash N the samurai nodded solemnly. Backslash U 201 C Then, we must seek audience with this foreman. Backslash U 201D backslash N U 201 C Good luck with that. Backslash U 201D Lyra snorted. Backslash U 201 C The man backslash U 2019's got the diplomatic skills of a pissed-off porcupine. Backslash U 201D backslash N The deck shuddered again, as if the station, much like Raxel, was having a crisis of identity. Lights flickered, alarms wailed, and Raxel found himself wondering if a career in gardening would backslash U 2019 be been less stressful. Backslash N U 201 C All right, folks. Backslash U 201D Raxel said, clapping his hands together. Backslash U 201 C Let backslash U 2019's try not to break anything important. Or each other. We backslash U 2019 LL get you sorted out. Somehow. Backslash U 201D backslash N The centurion lowered his sword, though his expression remained as skeptical as ever. Backslash U 201 C I will hold you to that. Raxel Torm. Backslash U 201D backslash N U 201 C. And I backslash U 2019 LL hold myself to not getting skewered. Backslash U 201D Raxel muttered under his breath. Backslash N Lyra backslash U 2019's face reappeared on the screen, her expression a curious blend of amusement and exasperate. Backslash U 201 C Torm. You think maybe we should keep them away from the reactor? Just a thought. Backslash U 201D backslash N U 201 C Good idea. Backslash U 201D he replied. Backslash U 201 Caltho This place hasn't backslash U 2019 T blown up yet, so they might not be the worst threat. Backslash U 201D backslash N with a reluctant sigh. Raxel motioned for the historical mishmash to follow him. Backslash U 201 C All right, follow me, and try not to touch anything that looks expensive or explosive. Backslash U 201D backslash N as they shuffled down the corridor, the Viking grinned at Raxel. Backslash U 201 C Strange world you have here, Raxel Torm. Backslash U 201D backslash N U 201 C Udon backslash U 2019 T. Know the half of it, buddy. Backslash U 201D Raxel replied. Backslash U 201 C And trust me, you backslash U 2019 re-getting the best tour package. Backslash U 201D backslash N They reached the main control room, where Grender was already pacing like a man whose lottery numbers had come up wrong. He stopped dead, eyes bulging at the eclectic group following Raxel. Backslash N U 201 C Torm. Backslash U 201D Grender said slowly, his voice a low growl of incredulity. Backslash U 201 See what the actual hell is this? Backslash U 201D backslash N U 201 C I backslash U 2019 D like to say it backslash U 2019's our new PR team. But I backslash U 2019 M guessing the truth is we backslash U 2019 V got a time rift problem. Backslash U 201D Raxel answered. Backslash U 201 C time rift. Like History popping out for a visit. \U201D \N U201C bingo. \U201D Raxel said, leaning casually against a console. \U201C seems the universe decided we needed a history lesson. \U201D N U201C. And what do you plan to do about it? \U201D Grender demanded. \N Raxel shrugged. \U201C close the rift, send them back, and maybe a stiff drink afterward. \U201D N the Centurion stepped forward, a commanding presence in sandals and armor. \U201C, we demand to return to our time. This is not our battle. \U201D N Grender glared at Raxel, as if this entire mess was his fault personally. \U201C fix it, Torm. Now, \U201D N U201C oh sure. Let me just pull out my magical wrench of temporal mending. \U201D Raxel retorted. \U201 see it \U2019 LL be easy as pie. Assuming pie is a disaster waiting to happen. \U201D N the alarms blared again, louder this time, with a rhythm that suggested imminent doom had decided to crash the party. N U201 see this way. \U201D Raxel grumbled, leading the motley crew back towards the observation deck. If they were going to fix anything, they'd have to start by figuring out what was actually wrong. Besides the obvious, \N the samurai fell into step beside him. \U201 see your world is complicated. \U201D he said, his tone respectful, if slightly bewildered. \N U201 see tell me about it. \U201D Raxel replied, pushing open the door to the observation deck. \U201C but hey, at least the view's interesting. \U201D N they stood together, staring out at the anomaly, a kaleidoscope of temporal chaos swaying in space. It was beautiful, in a way that made Raxel's stomach churn with unease. \N and then, as if the universe hadn't U2019T had enough fun, a new figure began to materialize, shimmering into view. Tall, imposing, and decidedly not from the local history museum. N U201C Lyra. \U201D Raxel whispered into his comm, his voice tight. \U201C you seeing this? \U201D N U201C yeah. \U201D she replied, her voice tinged with disbelief. \U201C looks like we got ourselves a new guest. The universe has a funny way of letting everyone know who's boss, mostly by screwing things up in the most spectacularly inconvenient ways. Helios Edge was no exception. The station was a cosmic monument to half-assed construction and even less inspired maintenance. It was clinging to life like a cat on a curtain, and every day was a question of whether today would be the day gravity forgot to keep up appearances. Raxel Torm, the unfortunate soul tasked with keeping this flying scrapyard operational, didn't have time for anachronistic tourists. But here they were, a growing collection of historical misfits, popping into existence with the same cheerfulness as a tax audit. "Fantastic," Raxel muttered, staring out the observation deck window. The anomaly outside looked like someone had mixed up their space-time salad, and now the Croutons were sentient. A new figure was already starting to shimmer into view. Just what we need, more time-traveling enthusiasts. The shadowy outline solidified into a knight in gleaming armor. Well, it might have gleamed once. Now it looked more like something a raccoon had been nesting in. The knight raised his visor and looked around, bewildered. "By the saints," he muttered, "what sorcery is this?" Raxel waved with all the enthusiasm of a man who just found out his hotel room had bedbugs. "Welcome to Helios Edge. Please keep all hands and arms inside the timeline at all times." Lyra's voice crackled over the comm. "Hey Raxel, any idea how many more we're expecting?" "No clue, but if this keeps up, we'll have enough for a historical reenactment society. Any chance you've got some good news?" "Define good," she replied dryly. "Powers fluctuating like a caffeinated squirt on a seesaw," Raxel grimaced. The station's resources were already stretched thinner than an asteroid miner's patience. They couldn't afford any extra drain. Perfect. Just perfect. Meanwhile, Grender was trying to channel the spirit of a man in control, which was as convincing as a cardboard cutout of authority. He had the Roman centurion cornered, gesticulating wildly. "Listen, buddy, I don't care if you're Caesar's second cousin, you need to stop poking things." The centurion, to his credit, looked unimpressed. "Your gods are displeased. These tremors and lights are their doing." "No, that's just the station's idea of a bad joke," Raxel interjected, stepping up. "And believe me, it's got a twisted sense of humor." As if on cue, the lights flickered, giving the room an eerie strobe effect. Somewhere in the distance, a conduit gave up the ghost with a resigned hiss. The samurai, observing quietly with a look that suggested he was re-evaluating his life choices, turned to Raxel. "What is your plan, master of this realm?" Raxel snorted. "Master, more like janitor." "The plan is to figure out what's causing this time jamboree and shut it down before we get a visit from Genghis Khan and his merry band of misfits." Across the room, the Viking had taken a keen interest in a ceiling panel, probably wondering how much mead he could store up there. Raxel sighed. "Hey, Eric the Red, how about not redecorating yet? We've got enough projects." The knight, still processing his abrupt relocation, attempted to make sense of the blinking lights and consoles around him. "Do these contraptions speak?" "Only if you insult their mothers," Raxel replied. "Otherwise, they're pretty silent." More figures began to coalesce in the observation deck. A pirate with a parrot that looked suspiciously like a small dragon, a clan of Scottish warriors who seemed to think the whole thing was a dream brought on by too much haggis, and a very confused man in a toga who had clearly taken a wrong turn at the Olive Bar. Grender threw up his hands. "Torm, this is getting out of hand. We can't keep playing host to the world's worst history lesson." "I'm open to suggestions," Raxel said, doing his best to ignore the clamor of voices. It was a chorus of confusion and misplaced bravado that you could probably hear in orbit around the next star system. The knight, deciding to embrace his inner diplomat, approached the samurai. "We must join forces to return to our own times." The samurai nodded, his expression grave. "Together we shall overcome this rift." Raxel rolled his eyes. "Great, they are forming alliances. What's next, the UN of Ancients?" Lyra's voice came through with a hint of mirth. "You think they'd vote better than our current council? Couldn't be worse," Raxel muttered. "All right, listen up," he called out, waving his arms. "I need everyone to stay calm and not touch anything. We're working on getting you home." "Who is we?" the pirate asked, squinting suspiciously. His parrot squawked an agreement, or maybe a demand for crackers. "We," Raxel said, gesturing to the entire room but focusing on Grender, who was pretending to be busy with something very important on his data pad. And I use "we" in the loosest possible sense. The room was becoming crowded, a veritable stew of displaced warriors and explorers. Each new arrival added to the cacophony, and soon the observation deck was bursting with the kind of chaos that made your average circus look like a meditation retreat. Grender glared at the growing crowd. "This station can't handle this. We're running low on power and patience." "Yeah, and we can't exactly send out for more supplies," Raxel said, doing his best to stifle the rising tide of panic. Not unless we want to explain to HQ why we're feeding Julius Caesar and company. A loud crash echoed through the room as one of the Celts decided to practice his hammer throw on a particularly innocent console. Sparks flew and the lights dimmed ominously. "Okay, that's it," Raxel shouted, hands in the air. "Everyone chill out before you bring this whole junkyard down on us." The Viking paused mid-inspection of a fire extinguisher, looking sheepish. "Sorry, thought it was a horn of mead." Raxel pinched the bridge of his nose, a headache brewing like bad coffee. "All right, here's how it's going to go. We need to stabilize the power before anything else. If this rift gets any bigger, we'll be hosting Madame Curie and her radioactive chemistry set." The Centurion nodded sagely. "We shall aid you, strange engineer. Appreciate the offer, but unless you can reroute power from the auxiliary reactors, you're better off not touching anything." Raxel gestured to the controls. "Grender, think we can get a team to the engine room." Grender's face was a study in reluctant leadership, like a man asked to babysit a rabid ferret. "We don't have the manpower, not with everything else going haywire." The pirate leaned inconspiratorially, his breath smelling of rum and bad decisions. "Perhaps a trade of services, eh? You get us back, we help keep this vessel afloat." Raxel considered it, weighing the options. They needed all the help they could get, and if there was one thing historical figures knew, it was how to handle unexpected challenges. "All right," he said finally, "but no sword fights in the corridors. Last thing we need is an airlock malfunction." The knight clanged a gauntlet to his chest plate. "You have the word of Sir Berenger, protector of the realm." "Great," Raxel replied, hoping it carried more weight than a political promise. "Let's get moving then. Lyra, can you start diagnostics from the control room?" "Already on it," she replied, the sound of her tapping keys a comforting backdrop. "But I gotta say, it's like trying to untangle a noodle monster in here." "Sounds like my last relationship," Raxel muttered as he led the eclectic group out of the observation deck, making sure the historical reenactors didn't get distracted by shiny things along the way. The samurai and knight flanked him, an odd honor guard for a man who felt more like a condemned prisoner than a rescuer. The corridor lights flickered above them, underscoring the urgency of their mission. As they entered the engine room, the pirate sidled up beside Raxel. "So, what's our first move, Captain?" "We stabilize the power before this place decides to implode," Raxel said, pointing to the snarled mess of cables that passed for the station's nervous system. "Everyone find something that looks important and try not to break it." The knight, no doubt thinking of dragons and damsels, drew his sword with a flourish. "We shall conquer this beast," Raxel nodded, hoping the station's system didn't take offense. "Yeah, let's do that. And if anyone sees a dragon, try not to stab it." "That's our coolant system." With the team in place, Raxel started issuing orders, his headset crackling with Lyra's updates as she worked to stabilize the core power feed. The historical rogues took to their tasks with varying degrees of enthusiasm and confusion, but somehow progress was made. The Centurion, having decided that brute force beat finesse, was valiantly trying to secure a loose panel with a series of vigorous kicks. "These walls are weaker than a Gaul's resolve," he muttered between blows. Raxel shook his head, turning his attention to the flashing console. "Lyra, how's it looking?" "The power's stabilizing, but we're still losing juice faster than a sieve in a wine cellar. Whatever's causing that rift is sucking us dry." "Figures," Raxel replied, watching as the samurai delicately adjusted a valve with the precision of a surgeon. "Any signs of the rift closing?" "Nope, it's wider than ever. We're gonna need a miracle or a shutdown code." The Viking, whose attention had wandered to a nearby set of wrenches, grinned. "In our sagas we speak of miracles. Perhaps this is one, or a curse," Raxel said, eyeing the flickering lights. "But let's hope it's the former." As the minutes ticked by, the room moved with a frantic urgency. Raxel found himself coordinating a cooperative effort against chaos itself, each step a precarious dance along the edge of disaster. At last, Lyra's voice cut through the din. "I've got something." It looks like a temporal waveform amplifier went haywire. We shut it down, we might just send everyone back to their own time. That's our ticket, Raxel said, adrenaline spiking with a hope he hadn't dared entertain. All right, everyone, this is it. Final push. The samurai nodded, hand poised above a switch that might as well have been the sword of Damocles. Your command, Torm. Do it, Raxel said, holding his breath. With a deft flick of the wrist, the samurai activated the shutdown sequence. The room shuddered, lights flaring then winking out, leaving them in a momentary void of uncertainty. Then, with a sound like the universe exhaling, the anomaly began to collapse, its pull receding as timelines reasserted themselves. The figures around him shimmered, outlines blurring as history reclaimed its lost wanderers. Farewell, brave engineer, the knight said, voice echoing as he faded. May your future be brighter than this. Raxel managed a tired smile. Wouldn't take much. As the last of the visitors disappeared, the station stilled, the hum of systems returning to a familiar, comforting cadence. The crisis had passed, leaving behind only the lingering smell of burnt circuits and the memories of a day they'd never quite believe. Lyra's voice, weary but triumphant, came through the calm. You did it, Raxel. We're stable for now. For now, Raxel echoed. I'll take it. He looked around the empty room, feeling the weight of exhaustion settling in like an old friend. Think we've seen the last of them? Grender asked, appearing at his side, face a mix of relief and residual irritation. Who knows, Raxel said, shrugging. Just another day on Helios' edge. Together, they made their way back to the control center, the station once again their own. The universe might be a capricious beast, but they'd managed to tame it, at least until the next time it decided to throw them a curveball. So, how about that drink? Raxel suggested as they entered the mess hall, his thoughts already drifting to the bottom of a much-needed bottle. After today, I think we've earned it, Grender agreed, clapping him on the shoulder. And as they shared a toast to survival, Raxel couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Life on Helios' edge was never dull, and that was just the Raxel Torm was back in the control center, hands greasy with the residue of panic sweat and oil from the day's chaos. He could still smell the burnt circuits. Or maybe that was just the lingering aroma of desperation. Hard to tell when you lived on a space station held together by duct tape and misguided optimism. Lyra's voice cracked through the calm, cutting through the silence like a knife through stale bread. So, what's the plan, Raxel? We can't just keep hoping these historical pop-ins figure out they don't belong here. Raxel grunted, flipping through the manual that was less about actual instructions and more about creative ways to swear at machinery. Yeah, well, hoping's about as useful as a chocolate teapot at this point. We need to communicate with them, get everyone on the same page. Lyra chuckled, a sound that was more sardonic than amused. Right. You gonna start with English 101 for dummies for those timeshifters? Raxel smirked, eyes scanning the junk around him. Nope, something better. He dug out a pile of old tech, parts that once dreamed of grandeur before ending up in Helios' Edge's version of a graveyard. Shuffling through obsolete communicators and discarded headsets, he found what he was looking for, a pair of translation devices so ancient they might as well have been hieroglyphs. But they might work, assuming they didn't spontaneously combust on contact. Raxel tapped his communicator. Grender, where are you? We need to rally the troops. Grender's voice came back, sounding as thrilled as a man about to attend his own funeral. I'm babysitting a bunch of Romans. Why? Get them and the rest to the observation deck. We're having a meeting. Grender sighed, the sound of a man who just remembered he left the stove on and his house was now a bonfire. Sure, what's another pile of insanity on today's buffet? As Raxel made his way back to the observation deck, he couldn't help but notice the station's usual creaks and groans seemed even more pronounced. It was like walking inside a giant tin being twisted by giant, sadistic children. The observation deck was a riot of colors and confusion. The Celts were eyeing the windows like they might be portals to another realm, which, given the current mess, wasn't entirely inaccurate. The Vikings were engaged in a spirited debate with Sir Berenger concerning the merits of axes versus swords, while the pirates were trying to teach the centurions how to play cards. Badly. Raxel cleared his throat, the sound like gravel against metal. "Listen up, everyone," he yelled, holding up the translation devices. "We need to talk properly without all the hand gestures and misunderstandings." The crowd paused, eyes turning to him. It was like being front and center at a Glorkian execution, lots of interest, none of it comforting. "I've got these," Raxel said, waving the devices. "They're supposed to translate speech. Don't ask me how it works, but we're going to give it a shot." Sir Berenger stepped forward, the weight of his armor a constant reminder that no one had invented lightweight plating in his time. "And if these devices fail, then you can call me a wizard and we'll all go have a beer," Raxel replied, strapping the device to his head and handing another to Hrothgar, the Viking chief who looked like he'd just been told he was out of mead for the winter. Hrothgar eyed the device as if it might bite him. "What is this sorcery?" he asked, voice a cautious growl. "Techno-sorcery," Raxel said with a grin. "Put it on and we might actually understand each other without needing to resort to interpretive dance." The Viking grunted, sliding the headset on with a clumsy mimicry of what he'd seen Raxel do. There was a tense moment, the kind where you expect everything to catch fire and explode, but instead the device crackled to life. Raxel tested it with a cautious, "Can you hear me?" Hrothgar blinked, then nodded slowly. "Aye, though your voice is strange." "That'll be the accent," Raxel said. "And the fact that I'm not shouting across a battlefield," the crowd murmured, a ripple of surprise and curiosity passing through the motley assembly. Grendar, appearing at Raxel's side, looked at the scene like a man who just watched his nemesis slip on a banana peel. "Nice trick," Grendar muttered. "And now what?" "We lay down some rules," Raxel said, eyeing the crowd. "We've got to work together or this station's going to be a historical landfill." Raxel turned to the crowd. "All right, folks. We've got power stabilized for now, but we can't keep going like this. We need to maintain peace and keep this station from turning into a historical reenactment of the apocalypse." The Viking chief nodded. "We understand the need for order, but some of my warriors are restless. They talk of challenging your authority." Raxel raised an eyebrow. "Challenging my authority? What, you want to arm wrestle over who gets to fix the next power surge? Maybe they just want to see who's the biggest nuisance," Lyra quipped over the comm, her voice a welcome intrusion. "Look," Raxel continued, addressing the crowd. "We get you back to your times, and you help us keep this bucket of bolts from becoming space dust. Deal." The murmur of agreement was hesitant but there, a shaky foundation for what needed to happen next. But something in Hrothgar's steely eyes told Raxel they weren't entirely out of the woods yet. Vikings, after all, weren't known for their patience or diplomacy. Grendar leaned over. "You think this'll hold?" Raxel shrugged. "Do I look like a prophet? I'm just trying to avoid getting skewered by a century-spanning collection of cutlery." The pirate, who had been listening with unexpected interest, stepped forward. "And what of us, eh?" "We remain until your gizmo sends us back, is it?" "That's the idea," Raxel replied. "Unless you want to try your luck navigating the galaxy with a treasure map and a compass." The pirate laughed, a sound that had about as much warmth as a glacier. "I've seen worse captains." "We'll stick around." The meeting wound down, the crowd dispersing with the sort of reluctant camaraderie that came from shared survival rather than genuine friendship. Still, it was a start, and in Raxel's book that was something. As the warriors ambled off, some curious at the wonders of a future they couldn't understand, others still wary of their new surroundings, Raxel felt a presence looming behind him. It was Hrothgar, his expression unreadable beneath the wild beard and the kind of eyes that had seen one too many battles. "What else do you need from us?" the Viking asked, his tone one of reluctant alliance. "For now, just don't break anything. This station's got enough problems without being accidentally pillaged." Hrothgar's face broke into a grin, a thing as rare as a peaceful Helios edge morning. "We shall see. But if you need warriors, you have them. Great, Raxel said. I'll keep that in mind next time someone challenges me to a death match over who gets the last cup of coffee. With that, the Viking turned and rejoined his compatriots, leaving Raxel and Grendor standing amidst the fading chaos. Lyra's voice crackled through the calm again. Think it'll work, Raxel sighed, running a hand through hair that hadn't seen a comb since the last time the station functioned without crisis. If it doesn't, we'll cross that bridge when it collapses under us. Good plan, Lyra replied, sarcasm dripping from every syllable. Grendor shook his head, looking out at the mismatched panels and the ever-present duct tape. We might just survive this mess, Raxel. Raxel nodded, a tired smile ghosting across his face. Yeah, if we do, I'm booking a one-way trip to anywhere that isn't here. As the day dragged on into whatever passed for night in space, Raxel found himself back in the engine room, tinkering with a console that had an alarming tendency to spark. He was joined by Sir Berenger, who had taken an unexpected liking to the place, regarding it with the same reverence most people reserved for churches or bars. You seem troubled, engineer, the knight said, his voice a rumble of concern. Raxel snorted. Troubled? You try explaining temporal rifts and energy conservation to a station that thinks maintenance is a dirty word. Berenger chuckled, a sound like gravel in a tin can. In my time, we had simpler concerns, but challenges are what make us, are they not? Maybe, Raxel replied. Or maybe they just make us tired. Berenger nodded sagely, as if Raxel had just imparted the wisdom of the ages rather than a gripe about sleep deprivation. Their moment of camaraderie was interrupted by a message from Lyra. Raxel, we have a problem. Of course we do, Raxel muttered, abandoning the console and heading for the control room, Berenger in tow. What's going on? The rifts fluctuating again. We might get more visitors. Fantastic, Raxel replied, his tone drier than a Martian sandstorm. Just when I thought we were done with hosting history's greatest hits. The control room was a flurry of activity, screens blinking with data that meant more work than either Raxel or Grendor wanted to contemplate. Lyra was already there, eyes fixed on a monitor like it might reveal the secrets of the universe if she stared hard enough. What are we looking at? Raxel asked, leaning over her shoulder. Temporal spikes, Lyra said, pointing to a series of fluctuating graphs. It's like someone plugged a toaster into a black hole. And here I thought we'd have a quiet evening, Raxel quipped, scratching his head as he studied the data. Grendor joined them, looking at the graphs with the same enthusiasm one might reserve for a tax audit. What do we do? Raxel rubbed his chin, the beginnings of a plan sparking in his mind. We need to stabilize it before it dumps a whole new set of questionable friends on us. Lyra nodded, already working on a solution. We could try rerouting the power, take some of the pressure off the core. Let's do it, Raxel said, turning to Berenger. Think you can handle a control panel without declaring war on it? The knight nodded, a grin breaking through his usual stoic demeanor. I shall smite it with precision, as you say. Great. Let's hope precision's what it takes. As they worked, coordinating efforts to stabilize the power flow and suppress the rift's erratic behavior, Raxel couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of his life. Here he was, an engineer on a falling-apart space station, relying on a medieval knight to help prevent a temporal catastrophe. And yet somehow it worked. The rift calmed, its fluctuations smoothing out under their combined efforts. It was a temporary fix at best, but on Helios' edge, temporary was about as good as permanent. When the danger had passed, Raxel slumped into a chair, exhaustion pulling at his bones. We did it, Lyra said, the relief in her voice mirrored by the faint smile on her face. Yeah, Raxel agreed, looking around at his motley crew. For now, anyway. Grendor clapped him on the shoulder, a rare gesture of camaraderie that felt like a pat from a bear. Not bad, Torm. Not bad at all, Berenger echoed, the knight's eyes shining with the thrill of a battle well fought. Raxel chuckled, the sound dry and weary but genuine. Just another day on Helios' edge, right? And as they sat in the control room, the station momentarily at peace, Raxel allowed himself the luxury of hope, because if they could survive this, maybe, just maybe, they'd make it through whatever the universe threw their way next. Raxel was just starting to believe he'd earned a few hours of shut-eye when the station's alarm blared with the subtlety of a banshee in heat. "Of course," he mumbled, rubbing his face as if it might wipe away the fatigue. "Why wouldn't the universe wait until I had a nap?" Grender, looking as if he'd been napping with one eye open, appeared at Raxel's side. "What's the crisis this time?" he asked with the enthusiasm of a man asked to chew glass. Raxel studied the control panel, its lights flickering in a chaotic rhythm that could give a disco a run for its money. "Solar flare," he said, pointing to a readout indicating a surge of energy that could fry their circuits quicker than a bug zapper. "Ah, Helios edge," Grender sighed. "The gift that keeps on giving." Lyra's voice crackled over the comm. "Was hoping we could catch a break before the sun decided to throw a tantrum." "Hope's a dangerous thing around here," Raxel replied, quickly tapping commands on the console. "Grender, get Hrothgar and his merry band of misfits. We're going to need some muscle." Grender nodded, heading off with the air of a man resigned to his doomed fate. Meanwhile, Raxel toggled the intercom, his voice echoing through the failing corridors and leaky hatchways. "Attention all guests of Helios Edge, today's entertainment involves not being roasted alive. Please proceed to the control center for directions on how to not die." In the chaos that followed, Hrothgar arrived, a reluctant alliance forged in the fires of desperation. "What madness is this now, Raxel?" the Viking chief asked, his warriors arrayed behind him, an assortment of bemused and battle-hungry expressions on their faces. "The sun decided to go all medieval on us," Raxel replied, indicating the consoles. "We're getting a solar flare, and unless we want to be the universe's crispiest space station, we're going to need to work together." Hrothgar stroked his beard, the motion turning into a thoughtful tug. "And how do you propose we fight the sun?" "Not by waving axes at it," Raxel said dryly. "We need to shield the station, reroute power, and pray to whatever gods are listening." The Viking nodded. "I see. This will be a worthy challenge for my warriors." "Great," Raxel said, clapping his hands together. "You handle the manual labor of reinforcing the hull. I'll deal with the tech, and together we'll make sure we don't become a floating barbecue." As Hrothgar barked orders at his men, sending them off to gather materials and tools, Raxel turned to Lyra. "What do we have in terms of shielding?" Lyra, who had been working furiously at the controls, looked up. "We can use the station's waste panels as makeshift shields, but it's going to be a patchwork job at best." "Patchwork is our specialty," Raxel muttered, turning to find Berenger watching the proceedings with a mix of fascination and confusion. "How can I aid this endeavor?" the knight asked, his hand resting on the pommel of his sword like it might offer him the answers. Raxel grinned. "You're going to help me reroute the power. Just don't stab anything unless I say so." As they worked, the station's motley crew pulling together under the threat of solar annihilation, Raxel couldn't help but feel a grudging admiration for their efforts. Even Hrothgar, who had initially seemed more likely to ransack the place than help, was overseeing his warriors with a grim determination that spoke volumes about his leadership. "Think it'll hold?" Grender asked, reappearing with a bundle of duct tape that had become their unofficial mascot. "If it doesn't," Raxel said, eyeing the patched panels with skepticism, "we might as well start a fire sale on the whole station." Lyra snorted, typing commands to recalibrate the shielding systems. "I'd buy a ticket to that." The station creaked ominously as they worked, the hull groaning under the strain of reinforcing itself with whatever scraps and salvage they could muster. It was the kind of makeshift engineering that would give a professional mechanic a heart attack, but on Helios Edge, it was just another Tuesday. Hrothgar joined Raxel at the control console, his expression a mix of curiosity and grudging respect. "You do not fight with weapons, yet you hold power over this domain," Raxel shrugged. "I'd rather not fight at all, but when the universe insists, I prefer my battles with circuits and code." The Viking chuckled, a deep rumble that seemed to echo through his chest. "In my time, we would face our foes with steel in hand. But there is honor in this, too." "Honor's just another word for not dying today," Raxel replied, his fingers flying over the keyboard. As the solar flare hit, the station shuddered, lights flickering as power was routed through every available channel to maintain the shields. The tension was palpable, a tangible thing that seemed to stretch between them all like an invisible wire. "Hold it together," Raxel muttered, his eyes fixed on the fluctuating readouts. For a few agonizing minutes they danced on the knife's edge of destruction, held aloft by little more than duct tape and determination. But then, gradually, the tremors subsided, the solar flare passing without reducing them to space dust. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room, shoulders slumping as the tension bled away. Raxel leaned back, a weary grin on his face. "Well, we didn't explode. I'll take that as a win." Lyra nodded, exhaustion etched into her features. "I'm starting to think the universe just likes messing with us. At least it keeps things interesting," Grender said, his voice carrying a hint of humor. Hrothgar clapped a hand on Raxel's shoulder, the force of it nearly knocking him over. "You are a mighty chieftain, Raxel Torm. We owe our survival to you." Raxel chuckled, waving away the compliment. "I'm just a guy trying to keep this station from falling apart. But thanks." As the crisis passed and the station settled back into its usual precarious balance, Raxel found himself reflecting on the strange alliance they'd formed. Vikings, knights, pirates, and engineers, unlikely allies in an even unlikelier place. "So what now?" Berengar asked, sheathing his sword with a flourish. "Now," Raxel replied, stretching his arms above his head. "Now we patch up the patchwork, pray nothing else goes wrong, and maybe, just maybe, catch a few hours of sleep." Hrothgar nodded, his warriors beginning to disperse, some with new stories to tell, others still wary of the strange future they'd found themselves in. "We will be ready should the need arise again." Raxel watched them go, a strange mix of pride and disbelief swirling in his thoughts. Somehow, against all odds, they'd pulled together and survived another day. And on Helios' edge, that was as close to a miracle as you could get. As the station's systems returned to a semblance of normalcy, Raxel took a moment to breathe, the weight of the universe's latest joke finally easing from his shoulders. He caught Lyra's eye, a shared acknowledgement of the madness they'd navigated. "Think we can keep this up?" she asked, her tone teasing but with an undercurrent of genuine concern. Raxel shrugged, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Who knows? But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we can handle whatever the universe throws at us. Even if we have to duct tape it all together." And as they stood there, in the heart of a station held together by little more than ingenuity and hope, Raxel allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd make it through whatever came next. The alarms on Helios' edge had a way of drilling into a man's skull like an overeager dentist with a vendetta. Raxel Torm rubbed his temples, wondering if he'd ever get a moment's peace before the universe decided to shove its next cosmic disaster down his throat. The control panel blinked like a Christmas tree on acid, and Raxel sighed. "All right, what fresh hell is this?" He muttered to nobody in particular, though the station seemed to have developed a personality of its own, if only to mess with him. Grender appeared, a shadow of resignation under his eyes. "Do I even want to know? Time rift's gone wonky," Raxel said, gesturing to the chaotic display. "Somehow it's making the star as stable as a caffeine addict on withdrawal." Grender leaned in, squinting at the readouts. "You mean our charming station is now a cosmic blender set to puree?" "Exactly," Raxel replied. "And we're the fruit salad." Lyra's voice crackled over the intercom, static heavy enough to make her sound like she was broadcasting from the fifth dimension. "Hey guys, just a heads up. The temporal anomaly is now destabilizing the star, so no pressure or anything." "Thanks for the pep talk," Raxel said, sarcasm dripping from his words. He turned to Grender. "Get the Viking crew. Looks like their presence is part of the problem. Maybe they're also part of the solution." Grender shot him a look that suggested Raxel had just asked him to herd cats with chopsticks. You want warriors with axes to fix a time rift, and how, pray tell, shall we do that? Sacrifice a goat or maybe do a jig. Got any better ideas? Raxel replied, one eyebrow raised. Grender sighed. Fine. I'll grab Hrothgar and his merry band of misfits. As Grender headed off, Raxel turned back to the control panel, contemplating the absurdity of his life. He'd signed up for a quiet stint on a backwater station, not this cosmic circus. Minutes later, Hrothgar and his warriors filed into the control center, their presence somehow both comforting and completely out of place. Hrothgar's eyes met Raxel's, a flicker of understanding passing between them. The star grows angry much like the gods of old, Hrothgar said, his voice a gravelly rumble that suggested he'd been yelling over the din of battle a few centuries too long. Yeah, well, your gods have lousy timing, Raxel replied, glancing at the readings. Apparently, your arrival's connected to the time rift messing with our star. Any chance you know a ritual or two for calming down a celestial temper tantrum? Hrothgar stroked his beard. We have songs and stories of old, tales of warriors who spoke to the stars themselves, but they never mentioned what to do when those stars decide to obliterate you. Fantastic, Raxel said, exasperated. We've got a cosmic problem and a bunch of medieval solutions. Anyone got a time machine manual lying around? Maybe we can just ask nicely, Lyra suggested over the intercom. Please, oh mighty star, don't fry us like bacon. Raxel chuckled despite himself. Worth a shot, I guess. The station shuddered ominously, a reminder that time was not on their side. Raxel began typing furiously, fingers dancing over keys as he tried to stabilize the systems. We need to isolate the rift and divert its energy. If we can channel it through the station's auxiliary systems, we might avoid turning into stellar ash. How do we do that? Asked Berenger, looking every bit like a knight desperately out of his element. Raxel tossed him a toolkit, half spatula, half hopes and dreams. Here, welcome to the 29th century version of dragon slaying. Just don't poke anything important. Grender returned with a coil of wires, duct tape, and an expression of impending doom. I see we're embracing the try not to die approach. Pretty much, Raxel said, nodding to Hrothgar. Your warrior's good at following orders, as long as they're not suicidal, Hrothgar replied, his tone light but his eyes serious. Great. Because what we're about to do might be a little bit of both. With Hrothgar's warriors stationed at critical junctions, Raxel began orchestrating a symphony of chaos. They rewired failing systems, duct-taped gaping breaches, and generally made the station less of a death trap, though only by a margin. Don't you love it? Grender quipped. When the fate of the universe comes down to whether or not you can find the right adapter. Just another day in paradise, Raxel replied, swiping sweat from his brow. And by paradise, I mean this rust bucket of doom. The station howled and groaned as if objecting to the whole affair. Light flickered, casting the control room in a strobe-like dance between safety and obliteration. Berenger, holding onto a panel that seemed one good sneeze from detaching, called over, This is madness, Raxel. No, Raxel corrected. This is Helios' edge. As they worked, Hrothgar began to chant, his voice rising and falling with a rhythm that matched the pulse of the failing station. His warriors joined in, their voices a raw, primal counterpoint to the digital chaos surrounding them. What's that supposed to do? Lyra asked, her voice crackling over the intercom with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Hopefully not summon Cthulhu, Raxel answered, shrugging. Or if it does, let's hope he likes Vikings. The lights dimmed, then flared as if caught in the grip of some unseen hand. Raxel gritted his teeth, feeling the weight of the universe pressing down like a cosmic anvil. Hold it together, you bastard, he muttered to the control panel, the station, the universe, take your pick. The chanting reached a crescendo, and for a moment, time seemed to hold its breath. The air grew thick, charged with a tension that went beyond science or logic into the realm of myth and madness. And then, slowly, the station's systems began to stabilize. The lights ceased their frantic dance and the alarms mercifully silenced, leaving only the hum of machinery and the labored breathing of the crew. "Did we do it?" Grender asked, eyes wide with disbelief. "Looks like it," Raxel replied, cautiously optimistic. "Or at least we bought ourselves some time." Hrothgar let out a breath, his shoulders relaxing. "The old songs, they speak of warriors who could change the fate of worlds. Perhaps there's truth in them after all. Or maybe we're just too stubborn to die," Raxel said, wiping a hand across his face. As the air of crisis ebbed, Raxel surveyed the ragtag group assembled before him. From knights to Vikings, engineers to exasperated spacefarers, they'd come together in a way that defied logic and history. "All right, folks," Raxel said, clapping his hands. "Let's patch up this mess before the universe decides to throw its next curveball." Lyra's voice chimed in, lightening the mood. "Think the universe will give us a break before then?" "Not a chance," Raxel replied. "But at least we've proven we can handle whatever it throws at us. Even if we have to duct tape it all together." With the immediate danger past, everyone dispersed to their duties, leaving Raxel alone with his thoughts. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but they'd managed to pull together and survive another day. Raxel glanced out the observation window, at the unstable star that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. "Hope you're done toying with us," he murmured, though he knew better than to count on the universe's mercy. As the station settled into a tentative calm, the reality of their situation weighed heavily once more. They had staved off disaster, but the time rift and its consequences lingered like a shadow over their every move. "Raxel," Grender called from a nearby console, his tone more serious than usual. "You might want to see this." Raxel ambled over, eyes narrowing at the screen. The rift's energy readings were fluctuating again, a reminder that their patchwork solution was just that, temporary. "We're not done yet," Raxel said, determination hardening his voice. "Figures," Grender replied, rubbing his temples. "Can't catch a break around here. Ever think about retiring to a nice, quiet planet? Maybe one that doesn't try to kill you every day," Raxel admitted. "But then I'd miss this, whatever this is. Masochism. Adventure," Raxel corrected with a wry grin. "Though right now I'd settle for a good night's sleep." In the days that followed, the crew of Helios Edge worked tirelessly to reinforce their makeshift repairs. The Vikings, now honorary members of the space station's motley crew, lent their muscle and battle-hardened determination to the effort. As they labored together, the warriors shared tales of their own time, stories of glory and defeat, of gods and monsters. And in return, they learned of the strange, wondrous cosmos they now inhabited, a place where stars could rage and time could bend. "Your world is filled with wonders," Hrothgar said one evening as they gathered around the observation deck. "But it is also a place of great danger." "Yeah, we like to keep things interesting," Raxel replied, sipping a cup of rehydrated coffee that tasted like regret. Lyra, leaning against the wall, added, "That's one way to describe cosmic obliteration." Hrothgar laughed, the sound a deep, booming echo. "You are strange folk, you spacemen, but in your hearts, you are warriors all the same." "High praise from a man who literally fights dragons," Raxel said with a nod. As the conversation continued, Raxel found himself almost enjoying the bizarre camaraderie they'd stumbled into. Maybe it was the shared threat of annihilation, or maybe it was just the sheer absurdity of their situation. Either way, it felt like they'd formed something unexpected, a bond forged in chaos. Despite the looming threat of the time rift and the stars' instability, there was a sense of hope, however fleeting. They'd faced the darkness and survived, proving that even in a universe determined to screw them over at every turn, they could hold their own. "Think we'll make it out of this?" Grender asked, tone low but curious. "We've made it this far," Raxel replied, with a shrug that spoke volumes. "And if we don't, at least we'll go down fighting." "Spoken like a true warrior," Hrothgar said, raising an imaginary horn in salute. The station hummed quietly around them, a reminder of the precarious balance they'd achieved. But for now, in this small moment of respite, Raxel allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way through the chaos. Because in the end, hope might be dangerous, but it was also the one thing that kept them fighting, kept them alive. And on Helios' edge, that was a victory in itself. Raxel Torm leaned back from the control panel, the screen's chaotic dance of numbers and lights reflecting his own tangled thoughts. A long, low whistle escaped him, the kind reserved for realizing just how deep you'd waded into the cosmic manure pit. "All right, team," he said with the enthusiasm of a man about to explain tax laws to a room full of toddlers. "I think I've got a plan. And by plan, I mean an idea that's probably half-baked and might kill us." Grender raised an eyebrow from his corner, where he'd been coaxing the translation devices to life. "Sounds promising. What's the catch?" "Oh, just a minor detail," Raxel replied. "We might have to risk our entire timeline to stabilize the rift." "You know, small stuff." The control room fell into a silence so thick you could spread it on toast. Raxel glanced over at Hrothgar, who was examining the toolkit with the curiosity of a bear trying to understand a Rubik's Cube. "Your warriors ever done any temporal spelunking?" Raxel asked, drumming his fingers on the console. Hrothgar let out a gravelly chuckle. "Time is a river, they say. But we have yet to swim its currents." Raxel nodded. "Well, we might just have to toss you in head first. There's a chance you're unique. Historical expertise could help us stabilize this mess from the inside." "Inside the rift." Lyra's voice crackled over the intercom, skepticism wrapped around each syllable. "That's not just crazy, Raxel. That's a whole new level of stupid." "Wouldn't be Helios' edge without a dash of stupid, would it?" Raxel shot back. Hrothgar's eyes sparked with the kind of fire that usually preceded someone doing something monumentally brave or monumentally stupid. "If there is a chance to fight this foe, we shall take it. Better to face the storm than wait for it to consume you." "That's the spirit," Raxel said, clapping his hands. "Or the lunacy, depending on how you look at it." Grender scratched his chin, looking thoughtful. "How exactly are we supposed to pull this off? We don't have a manual for temporal shenanigans, last I checked." "We go old school," Raxel replied. "Hrothgar and his crew head into the anomaly, use their Viking know-how to do whatever it is they do, and hopefully that stabilizes things enough for us to patch it up from this end." Berenger, the knight who still hadn't quite accepted his new role as cosmic adventurer, cleared his throat. "And if it doesn't, then at least we go down swinging," Raxel said, with the sort of gallows humor that was the currency of survivors. "What do you say, Hrothgar?" The Viking leader considered this, his gaze sweeping over his warriors, each one nodding in silent agreement. "We shall face this challenge, for honor and for the chance to see our homes again." "Don't worry," Grender added dryly. "We'll keep the lights on for you." Raxel tapped a few keys, bringing up the schematics of Helios' edge, highlighting the path to the rift nexus. "You'll need to suit up. There's no guarantee space-time plays fair, and I doubt it cares about historical accuracy." The warriors set about preparing, donning whatever passed for spacesuits, an unholy alliance of Viking armor and modern tech that looked like something out of a fever dream. Raxel felt a swell of something that might have been pride or maybe just shared insanity. As the warriors lined up, Raxel joined them at the airlock. "Listen, I know this is a lot to ask, but if anyone can stare down time itself, it's you guys." Berenger, adjusting his helmet with a grimace, managed a shaky smile. "Never thought I'd see the day I armor up to face the future." "Yeah, well, welcome to the club," Raxel said, clapping him on the shoulder. Hrothgar raised his arm, a rallying cry in his eyes. "Warriors of the North, we take this challenge not for glory but for survival. Let our deeds echo through the ages." The warriors answered with a cheer that rattled the bulkheads. Then they stepped into the airlock, and Raxel sealed it shut behind them. "Good luck," Lyra's voice came over the intercom, softer now. "You're going to need it." Raxel watched the warriors disappear into the depths of the station, a gnawing tension settling in his gut. They were either about to save the timeline or become a footnote in some intergalactic history book. The control room felt emptier without them. The hum of the station's systems, a constant reminder of the precarious line they walked. Raxel returned to the console, fingers flying over the keys as he monitored the rift's energy, a dance of light and danger. Lyra, keep an eye on their vitals. We don't want any surprises, Raxel said, the words half command, half plea. Already on it, she replied. You know, Raxel, you could have picked a safer hobby than cosmic crisis management. Where's the fun in that? He quipped, though he suspected fun had long since packed its bags and left the station. Grender joined him, leaning against the console. Think they'll pull it off? Raxel shrugged, a gesture heavy with uncertainty. If anyone can, it's them. But if not, well. At least we'll have a hell of a story to tell. Time stretched thin as the warriors moved towards the rift, their presence marked by a series of beeps and updates on the screen. Raxel felt every second like a weight, the possibilities branching out in 1,000 directions, most of them bad. As the warriors neared the rift, the station's systems began to shake, the lights flickering in a pattern that suggested the universe had a twisted sense of humor. Hold together, you piece of junk, Raxel muttered, his knuckles white from gripping the console. Hrothgar's voice crackled over the comms, a steady anchor in the storm. We approach the anomaly, the air. It feels alive. Raxel swallowed the lump in his throat, pushing down the fear that threatened to claw its way up. Just remember, hit it hard and fast, like a cosmic migraine. We shall do our best, Hrothgar replied, his voice carrying the weight of ancient battles and future hopes. The rift loomed before the warriors, a swirling vortex of light and shadow that defied description. It pulsed with a rhythm all its own, a heartbeat of the universe that threatened to swallow them whole. Raxel watched the screen, his breath caught in his chest. The warriors advanced, their forms silhouetted against the brilliance of the rift, a testament to bravery or perhaps sheer recklessness. Raxel, Lyra said, her voice tight with urgency. I'm seeing fluctuations. Big ones. Raxel cursed under his breath, adjusting the controls with a precision born of desperation. Hrothgar, whatever you're going to do, do it now. We are ready, Hrothgar replied, a calm certainty in his tone. The warriors began their chant, a low, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through the very fabric of reality. They moved in a synchronized dance, their weapons raised, their voices carrying the weight of ages. Raxel held his breath, every second an eternity as the warriors engaged the rift. The screen flared with light, the readings spiking in a chaotic symphony that defied logic. And then, as if drawn by some unseen force, the rift began to contract, its chaotic energy pulled inwards, stabilized by the warriors' presence. The reading steadied, the light dimming to a manageable glow. Holy hell, Grender breathed, eyes wide with disbelief. They're doing it. Of course they are, Raxel replied, a grin breaking through his tension. They're Vikings. The rift continued to stabilize, the warriors' chant echoing through the station, a song of defiance against the universe itself. Raxel watched, a mix of awe and relief coursing through him. Then abruptly the chant ceased, the warriors falling silent as the rift settled into a calm, steady glow. Raxel blinked, hardly daring to believe it. Did we actually pull it off? Lyra asked, her voice tinged with wonder. Looks like it, Raxel said, a laugh bubbling up despite himself. We might just live to see another day. Hrothgar's voice came over the comms, weary but triumphant. The rift, it calms. We have done as you asked. Raxel sagged against the console, the weight of the universe lifted, if only for a moment. You magnificent bastards, you did it. The control room erupted into a cheer, the sound ringing through the station like a promise of hope. The warriors had faced the storm and emerged victorious, their bravery carving a new future for them all. Raxel knew the battle wasn't over. The star still pulsed with its own life, and the universe had a habit of throwing curveballs when you least expected it. But for now, they had won a reprieve, a chance to breathe and prepare for whatever came next. Raxel, Grender said, clapping him on the back. Looks like you were right. Sometimes duct tape and determination can save the universe. Raxel laughed, the sound mingling with the echo of victory. Yeah, but let's not make a habit of it. As the crew celebrated, Raxel glanced out at the observation window. The stars light a reminder of the challenges still ahead. But for now, they'd faced the darkness and held their ground. And on Helios' edge, that was as close to a miracle as you could get. Raxel stood in the control center, his gaze bouncing between multiple screens like a pinball machine in a seedy arcade. The rift was stabilizing, sure, but he'd seen enough sci-fi flicks to know that calling a victory before the credits roll was asking for trouble. Besides, the universe loved its last-minute plot twists, usually involving something teetering on the edge of cosmic disaster. "All right, folks," he said, addressing the ragtag group of engineers, techies, and one bewildered time-traveling knight. "We might have bought ourselves some time, but let's not start patting each other on the back just yet. The rift's doing its thing, but it's still a hungry beast." Grender grunted, fiddling with the translation devices that had decided now was the perfect time to act like temperamental divas. "Hope you've got a plan, boss. Or at least a half-baked idea we can pretend is a plan." "Half-baked's generous," Lyra piped in over the intercom, her voice crackling with static and sarcasm. "More like half-torched. What's next, Raxel? You gonna ask the station to pretty please not fall apart?" "Don't tempt me," Raxel shot back, smirking. "But for now, let's focus on getting Hrothgar and his crew out of that anomaly without turning them into historical confetti." The flickering lights overhead seemed to agree, casting the control room in an off-putting strobe effect that did wonders for his rising headache. He could almost hear Helios' Edge's sigh of exasperation as it held itself together with little more than duct tape and wishful thinking. Meanwhile, Hrothgar and his Viking crew were still doing their thing inside the rift, chanting like their lives depended on it, which, funnily enough, they did. The anomaly's glow had settled into a less homicidal shimmer, but Raxel wasn't keen on testing its patience. "Grender," Raxel called, gesturing at the controls. "Think you can manage a recall without frying the circuits?" "Sure," Grender replied, rolling his eyes. "And afterward I'll juggle flaming torches while reciting ancient Martian poetry." Raxel flashed a grin. "Perfect. Knock yourself out." As Grender got to work, Raxel turned his attention back to the screens. The rift was like a cosmic kaleidoscope, constantly shifting and swirling, a rainbow with a severe anger management issue. The warriors' chanting seemed to be keeping it in check for now, but Raxel knew better than to trust anything that looked remotely stable in this mess. "Okay, Hrothgar," Raxel said into the intercom, his voice steady. "Time to bring you and your merry band back to the land of the living, or whatever we're calling this station." Hrothgar's voice came through, calm and resolute. "We are ready. Let us hope your technology is as brave as your words." "Braver, I hope," Raxel quipped, sparing a glance at Grender, who was now elbow-deep in the station's wiring, muttering curses that would make a sailor blush. "Ready on this end, Grender." "Just about," Grender grunted, yanking on a stubborn wire. "If this works, I'll personally kiss every bolt holding this bucket of bolts together." Raxel chuckled. "I'll hold you to that." With a final, fervent prayer to whatever entities might be listening, Raxel gave the go-ahead. The control room's hum intensified, the machinery groaning as it attempted to pull off the kind of cross-temporal conjuring trick that would have given Einstein nightmares. The station lights flickered, dancing to the erratic rhythm of the universe's perverse sense of humor. The rift on the screen contracted, pulling inward as if suddenly shy of its own grandeur. "Here they come," Lyra announced, her voice tight but hopeful. "Vitals are holding steady, mostly." "Mostly?" Raxel repeated, eyebrows raised. "Well, one of them showing signs of elevated cortisol levels," she replied with a shrug he could practically hear. But hey, who isn't stressed these days? As the station strained against the forces at play, Raxel watched the figures on the screen, the silhouettes of warriors stepping out from the brink of oblivion. The airlock hissed open, and Hrothgar emerged, his face a mask of determination and not a little fatigue. "We have returned," he declared, voice resonant with the kind of stately gravitas that only someone who stared down an angry rift could muster. "Welcome back," Raxel greeted, unable to hide his relief. "Nice to see you still in one piece." Hrothgar's lips twitched in something approximating a smile. "Thanks to your strange magic and the bravery of my brethren." "Magic, duct tape, what's the difference?" Raxel shrugged, grinning. "Now let's hope the universe doesn't have any more surprises up its sleeve." As if on cue, the station shuddered ominously, the lights overhead flickering like they were caught in a storm. Raxel swore under his breath, shooting Grender a look that said, "Really?" "Still getting used to the new settings," Grender explained, offering a sheepish grin. "Give it a few minutes and a lot of crossed fingers." Raxel sighed, turning back to the control panel. Despite the temporary reprieve, they weren't out of the cosmic woods just yet. The star was still a ticking time bomb, and the station's structural integrity was, at best, wishful thinking. "All right, team," Raxel said, steeling himself for the inevitable crunch time. "We've pulled off the impossible twice today. Third time's the charm, right?" "Or third time's the failure," Lyra countered, her voice equal parts wry and encouraging. But hey, why not roll the dice again? With the rift finally behaving like a well-mannered guest, the next step involved ensuring the star didn't decide to go supernova on their watch. "Raxel," Hrothgar said, his presence a solid, reassuring force beside him. "We have faced the storm and returned. What more must we do?" Raxel chuckled, the sound lacking humor. "Just another day at Helios' edge," he replied. "But if you're offering, we could use a bit of that Viking luck." "Luck has little to do with it," Hrothgar intoned, a glint of amusement in his eyes. "But we shall lend our strength to your cause." With the Vikings on board and the rift crisis averted, all eyes turned to the monitors displaying the star's vitals. The readings were a jumble of numbers and graphs, but to Raxel, they might as well have been a slap in the face. The star was still spiking, its energy volatile and unpredictable. "I thought we stabilized that," Grender said, throwing a wrench down in frustration. "Stabilize the rift," Raxel corrected. "Different beast, same headache." Berenger, the knight who still hadn't fully grasped the scope of his new reality, approached slowly, each clank of his armor a testament to the absurdity of their situation. "Is there naught else we can do to soothe this star's ire?" "Well, I could sing it a lullaby, but I doubt that's gonna cut it," Raxel replied, peering at the consoles. "We need a way to bleed off the excess energy before it decides to cook us all." "Science was never my strength," Berenger admitted, his expression a blend of archaic nobility and genuine curiosity. "But perhaps there is wisdom in simplicity." Raxel paused, considering the knight's words. Simplicity. In a universe that thrived on chaos, maybe the answer was staring them in the face. He glanced at Grender, who was still muttering to himself. "Grender," Raxel called, an idea forming. "What if we use the station's shielding to create a temporary energy sink?" Grender blinked, then his eyes widened in realization. "You mean act like a sponge, absorb the surges?" "Exactly," Raxel affirmed, feeling a spark of hope. "It's risky, but if we can reroute the energy spikes, we might buy enough time to stabilize the star." "And if it fails?" Lyra chimed in, skepticism coloring her tone. "Then we fry," Raxel replied, his voice laden with grim humor. "But at least we'll be crispy together." The plan was cobbled together with the kind of frantic determination that came naturally to those living on borrowed time. Raxel and Grender worked side by side, recalibrating the shielding system to handle the energy transfer. Meanwhile, Hrothgar and his warriors stood by, a silent testament to the power of unity in the face of the universe's indifference. Even Berenger lent a hand, his outdated armor clanking softly as he moved amidst the chaos. With the station's shielding rigged to act as an impromptu sponge, all that remained was to throw the switch and pray to whatever cosmic deities might be listening. "Okay, people," Raxel declared, his voice cutting through the tension. "This is it. Moment of truth." Grender gave him a nod, fingers poised over the controls. "Ready when you are." Raxel took a deep breath, the weight of their gamble heavy on his shoulders. Then, with a final glance around the room, he gave the signal. The station shuddered violently as the system engaged, the air humming with barely contained energy. The lights flickered in protest, the entire structure groaning under the strain. Raxel held his breath, watching the monitors with a mix of trepidation and hope. The reading spiked wildly, numbers dancing across the screen in a chaotic ballet. And then, slowly, painfully, the spikes began to level out, the star's volatile energy siphoned off by the station's jury-rigged shields. "Is it working?" Lyra asked, her voice a thin thread of hope amidst the chaos. "Looks like it," Raxel replied, amazement coloring his tone. "We're holding steady." For now, the tension in the room eased slightly, replaced by a tentative optimism. The star, once a ticking time bomb, now seemed content to simmer quietly, its rage temporarily quelled. "You did it," Grender said, clapping Raxel on the back. "Not bad for a half-baked idea." "Hey, we aim to please," Raxel replied, grinning. "Let's just hope it holds." As the crew celebrated their narrow escape, Raxel allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They'd stared down the abyss and lived to tell the tale, an accomplishment that was equal parts luck and audacity. "Raxel," Hrothgar said, his voice carrying the weight of gratitude and camaraderie, "we owe you our thanks. Without your guidance, we would not have survived this ordeal." Raxel shrugged, his expression one of genuine appreciation. "We all had a part to play, and who knows, maybe next time we'll do it without breaking a sweat." With the station systems humming along in relative harmony, the crew allowed themselves a moment to breathe. The crisis had passed, at least for now, and the promise of another day hung in the air like a lifeline. As Raxel surveyed the room, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. They'd faced the darkness and emerged stronger for it, their unlikely alliance a testament to humanity's resilience in the face of the unknown. And as far as victories went, that was good enough for him. The crew of Helios Edge had seen some bizarre shit in their time, but today really took the space cake. After all, it wasn't every day you teamed up with time-traveling Vikings to save your sorry existence from cosmic obliteration. Now, as the station hummed melancholically in the aftermath, Raxel Torm found himself in the middle of a scene that could only be described as surreal. Hrothgar and his merry band of anachronistic warriors were gathered around the observation deck, the place where miracles, or disasters, depending on your perspective, seem to happen most frequently. The Vikings were in high spirits, apparently unfazed by their jaunt through time and space. They clinked their mead horns together, which they had somehow procured despite the complete absence of a brewery on Helios Edge. Raxel, meanwhile, was trying to decide whether he felt more like a hero or a lunatic, probably a little of both. He leaned against a wall, one that didn't look like it might cave in at any moment, and watched the festivities with something approaching amusement. "Ever thought you'd host a Viking party in space?" Lyra asked, sidling up beside him. Her tone was as dry as the station's recycled air. "Not exactly on my bucket list," Raxel replied, watching as one of the warriors attempted to arm wrestle Grender. "But then again, neither was not dying today." "Always a plus," Lyra nodded, arms folded as she surveyed the room. "So, how's it feel being the savior of Helios Edge? Get a nice warm glow or just indigestion?" Raxel snorted. "Somewhere in between. Mostly just wondering when the other shoe's gonna drop. It's space. There's always another shoe," Lyra said. "Probably a whole damn closet of them waiting to whack us." The station groaned ominously, as if agreeing with her grim assessment. Raxel felt a pang of affection for the old bucket of bolts. It had held together long enough to see them through the worst of it, though he suspected that was more due to the efforts of his exhausted crew than any inherent resilience. Hrothgar approached, his armor clinking softly in the low gravity. There was something almost serene about him now, a warrior at peace after battle. "Raxel," he greeted with a respectful nod. "Your station is a marvel." Raxel chuckled. "Marvel might be a strong word. It's more like a stubborn mule that won't quit, no matter how many times you kick it." Hrothgar smiled, a genuine expression that seemed to brighten the room. "We have much to learn from each other. This adventure has taught us more than 100 battles." "Yeah, it's a regular cosmic classroom here," Raxel said, glancing at his battered control room. Only here, the lessons usually involve not getting fried by solar flares or sucked into a rift. The knight tilted his head, considering. Many in my time spoke of the stars as unchanging, yet here they dance and rage. You'd be surprised how much of the universe is just trying to kill you, Raxel replied with a sardonic smile. We just happen to be pretty good at dodging. Meanwhile, Grendor finally emerged victorious from his impromptu contest with the Viking, earning a few reluctant cheers. Don't know if arm wrestling counts as engineering, he muttered, rubbing his shoulder, but it's good to know I haven't completely lost my touch. Just chalk it up to cross-training, Raxel suggested. It's what we do best. Lyra glanced at the Vikings, who were passing around a makeshift drinking vessel and laughing uproariously. Think they'll find their way back home, or are they permanent guests? We'll find a way, Raxel assured her. Could use some of their fortitude around here, though. They might make half-decent engineers. Not sure how much help they'd be with a welding torch, Lyra pointed out. But their enthusiasm's infectious. Not a bad thing in a place that's one malfunction away from a fiery demise, Raxel agreed. The lights flickered briefly, a reminder that Helios' edge still had plenty of personality left, or, depending on your perspective, a dire need for therapy. Raxel took it in stride, used to the station's eccentricities. After all, who wasn't a little crazy these days? So what's next? Lyra asked, not unkindly. Figure out how to keep the star from waking up on the wrong side of the bed again. First a breather, Raxel decided. Then we'll tackle the rest, one crisis at a time. Got any big speeches prepared, oh fearless leader? Lyra teased. Raxel shook his head. Nah, I'm out of grand declarations for today. Just hoping tomorrow's a little less explosive. Can't blame you there, she said, her voice carrying a trace of genuine warmth beneath the sarcasm. The rest of the crew gradually joined them, the adrenaline of survival giving way to a more subdued camaraderie. Each person wore the exhaustion of battle like a badge of honor, a testament to their shared ordeal. There was something oddly comforting in the aftermath, a reminder that no matter how far you traveled, humanity was still humanity in all its messy, stubborn glory. Berenger, still coming to terms with his unexpected journey through the ages, approached cautiously. I've heard tales of the future's wonders, yet standing here it is all so bizarre. Welcome to the club, Raxel said. We're all just trying to make sense of it as we go. In my time the stars were a distant mystery. Now they seem almost within reach, Berenger mused, his eyes lingering on the view outside. Raxel followed his gaze, the star they'd just saved a shimmering presence in the vastness. Yeah, they're a little too close for comfort sometimes. The knight nodded, a subtle acknowledgement of shared struggle. I must admit this experience has challenged everything I believed. That's the thing about space, Raxel replied. It's got a way of messing with your perspective, makes you realize how small you are in the grand scheme of things. Indeed, Berenger agreed, a quiet resolve settling over him. Yet I find comfort in the knowledge that, small as we are, our actions can still shape the future. Or blow it to bits, Raxel added wryly. Either way, it's never boring. As the laughter and banter continued, Raxel felt a strange sense of contentment. Sure, their lives were chaotic, their futures uncertain, but they were alive. They'd faced down the impossible and come out the other side, a little more battle-worn but undeniably together. Hey, Raxel, Grendor called, interrupting his musings. Think we'll ever get used to this? Used to what? Near-death experiences or unexpected houseguests from the past? Raxel shot back, grinning. Both, Grendor replied, deadpan. Probably not, Raxel admitted. But then where's the fun in normal? The engineer chuckled, shaking his head. Fair point. The party eventually wound down, the Vikings' boisterous energy finally giving way to the reality of their predicament. Helios' edge, still floating precariously along the edge of chaos, needed more than just good intentions to keep it running. But for now, at least, they could bask in the rare glow of triumph. They'd shared a moment of unexpected unity, an alliance forged in the fires of crisis. And in the cold, unfeeling expanse of space, that was something worth celebrating. As the last of the crew trickled out of the observation deck, Raxel lingered a moment longer, the weight of leadership resting comfortably on his shoulders. Sure, they'd cheated death today, but tomorrow was another day, another series of challenges that would surely test them anew. Yet, staring out at the slowly turning star, Raxel couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, they'd come out stronger for it. After all, if a band of time-displaced Vikings could find common ground with a motley crew of spacefaring misfits, anything was possible. Hope's a dangerous thing, they always said. But sometimes, on the edge of oblivion, it was all you had. Raxel turned away from the view, the station's familiar creaks and groans a comforting reminder of their shared existence. Helios' edge might be a rust bucket held together by little more than wishful thinking, but it was their rust bucket, and together they'd face whatever the universe decided to throw at them next. "All right, Edge," he murmured, patting the wall affectionately. "Let's see what tomorrow brings." With a final nod to the stars, Raxel made his way back to the control room, ready to face whatever came next. After all, in the grand cosmic scheme, it wasn't the destination that mattered, but the journey and the friends you made along the way.